On the night of graduation, I was nervous and tense. I rose and faced the audience, and my speech rolled out. This is the quotation that starts off Quick Wright 5, and the questions that follow are, do you respect Wright by the end of chapter 8? Why or why not? Use specific examples. My initial response to that question is, no, I do not respect Richard by the end of chapter 8. He's obstinate, he's stubborn, he refuses to accept anybody else's answer. He refuses to ever think that he's wrong once he's made up his mind about something. And I'm going to use chapters 1, 8, and 10 to discuss this. But I want to start out by going back to the spot where this quotation occurs. So this quotation happens at the moment where Richard has been asked to deliver a speech to his graduating class. And Richard starts to write his own speech, figuring, as everybody probably would, hey, they asked me to deliver a speech, that must mean that they want me to write the speech. Well, his principal ends up pulling him aside and saying, hey, I want you to read this speech that I wrote. And Richard refuses. He has already made up his mind that he is going to write and deliver his own speech, and he refuses to do what somebody else asks or tells him to, even though he later recognizes that the principal's speech is the better speech. He still feels like the principal's speech doesn't say the things that Richard wants to say. The trouble here is that Richard is giving up an opportunity to go to college and get a good job as a teacher, because the principal has the ability to do those things for him. And by not reading the principal's speech, he's kind of getting on the principal's bad side. So he's giving up this opportunity all to stand by a decision that he's already made because he refuses to change his mind. So again, that's the stubbornness that I see in him, and that's why I don't have as much respect for Richard as I could. So let's go back to chapter 1, and we start off the novel with Richard setting fire to the house. Now, I'll cut him a little bit of slack here. He's 4 years old, but even still, he's underneath a burning house. He hears his mother screaming out for him. His mom thinks that he's dead, or that he's burning alive even. And of course, Richard knows that he could hop out from under the house and relieve his mom's stress, but he doesn't. He stays under the house because he doesn't want to get punished. So again, there's the beginning of that stubbornness from him. He's 4 years old at the time, so it's not as bad as it is when he's older, but still, this is where it all kind of starts. And then, of course, just a page or so later in chapter 1, we have that famous scene where Richard kills a cat, all to get back at his dad. So even though he knows that he's doing something wrong, Richard knows that he shouldn't kill the cat, and he knows that it's a bad thing to kill that cat. He's already decided that he's gonna kill the cat, and so he won't change his mind. He won't be convinced otherwise, no matter what. So again, it's that stubbornness that he sticks to his decisions once he's made them, even if he realizes later it was a bad decision. Jumping ahead quite a bit, when we get to chapter 10, we see Richard involved in a scheme where he's stealing movie tickets and reselling them in order to make money. And again, he knows this is wrong. He knows he shouldn't be doing this, but he does it anyway. At this moment in the book, actually, he talks about all these times where he's had feelings of uncertainty similar to what he's feeling at the moment where he's taking these tickets. And all the moments he describes are these really negative moments in his life. But he goes ahead and does it anyway because he needs to make money in order to go north. And in the same spot in the novel in chapter 10, not only is he a thief, but he's a burglar. He breaks into property and steals things. So he breaks into a neighbor's house and steals a gun and pawns that in order to keep the money. And he also recruits some friends to break into a college and steal some fruit preserves that they can sell later as well. And again, he's doing this all in order to make money to go north. So I suppose it's all for a good cause, but he knows it's wrong, but he refuses to change his mind about any of these things because he's already made the decision and he's already taken action. So he's not going to alter his plans, even if he realizes it's not the right thing to do. So another set of questions that we're focusing on right now are, how does Richard find a way to finally fit into society? And how does Richard ultimately find meaning in his meaningless suffering? And I think he does those things. And I think he does both of those things in chapter 10, actually. The end of chapter 10 has Richard making a realization about the nature of punishment and crime and what it means to lead a life that you're proud of. So he writes, in that moment, I understood the pain that accompanied crime, and I hoped that I would never have to feel it again. I never did feel it again, for I never stole again. And what kept me from it was the knowledge that for me, crime carried its own punishment. So we have Richard here thinking back on all of the things that he's done and realizing that it wasn't worth it, that he became somebody that he wasn't proud of, And even though he finally got what he wanted, the feeling of regret and feeling like he's led an awful life up to this point isn't worth it. So the very last sentence of chapter 10 is this realization. Well, it's my life, I told myself. I'll see now what I can make of it. And from that quotation, I see a version of Richard who is more hopeful of his future, who has some ideas that going forward, he's going to be able to live his life a little bit differently. That all of the bad things that he's done up to this moment has led to this realization that he can change the way that he's living, and he can become a better person. So even though we have a stubborn version of Richard who refuses to read a speech that was written by somebody else that he even admits is a better speech, a speech that would potentially get him a job as a teacher and steady income, the exact kind of thing that Richard wants, in fact. And even though this story starts out with Richard burning down a house and not admitting to it very readily, and killing a cat even though he knows it's wrong, and even though we see a version of Richard a little bit later who is a thief and a burglar, I think we also see a version of Richard who understands some things about life and the nature of what his decisions have led him to, and that he's not happy about it, but that he also knows that he can change and he can become a better person and he can hopefully lead a better life. So let's keep our fingers crossed and see what he can make of it.